We're good to go? Awesome. Okay, thanks to everybody for joining us for this PrEP study session. And the first thing we want to do is approve the agenda that was created by our esteemed colleagues, Jenny and Bernie, who put this together. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda? Sunny moves,
Second.
Jenny seconds. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All, any opposed? Nobody opposes, passes, great. So I wanted to welcome everybody to this study session, and I'll pass it over to our folks who are kind of running the show today, but this is an opportunity that we have as a board annually to come together and talk about board stuff and issues that we care about. And we kind of drive the agenda for this meeting as opposed to other meetings where staff primarily drive the agenda. And so this is a chance for us to get to know each other better. It's a chance for us to engage in more depth on issues that concern our role as board members. And it's a time to have fun. I've always enjoyed the study sessions / retreats that we've done. And I have no doubt that this year is going to be really entertaining, fun, informative, and really appreciate staff who are here as well. Thank you so much. Andy, thanks for joining us as well. And thank you all so much for giving us these amazing little goodie bags. These are cool. I mean, this is really a nice water bottle. That's just awesome. So thank you. And thanks for the chocolate too. And you had milk chocolate in there as well.
Thanks to Rosa for coordinating. And thank you all
Thank you, Rosa.
for your volunteerism.
Yeah, you're like, I cannot accept, take credit for this. Okay, so I will pass it over to Jenny and Bernie if you wanted to add anything to the intros. And I'll let you take it from here.
First of all, I want to thank everyone for sacrificing extra Monday in addition to the statutorily required Monday that comes next week. And it was also nice to see all six of us in the room together. I think it's been a few months since we've all been here. So Jenny and I asked all of you to kind of give us ideas for things that we are interested in, and there was no shortage. I think we all have a lot of interests and curiosities and concerns about our park system, and it was exciting to see how engaged everyone is and how the different perspectives that we all come to this committee from. Jenny and I did our best to kind of zero in on a couple of items that we think would be useful for this group. Hopefully this year and going forward. I, however, want to say that I think that we will find ways to address everybody's concerns throughout the coming months. Everybody's thoughts and ideas were important and valid and worthy of our time. So we chose 2 topics for this evening. Doesn't mean that the many topics that were discussed and not chosen are not important. I guess I'll close before turning it over to Jenny and saying that I hope it is fun. I can't say that we programmed a lot of fun, but it will be fun. Okay, make it fun. Jenny?
Yeah, I'll just echo everybody else's sentiments. I think that going through everybody's ideas, we tried to come up with the best possible options, board effectiveness really, and then kind of youth engagement and activity throughout the park system. So thankful to staff for coming out today to go through this with us. We do have one team building little exercise models, super fast and simple. We originally had 2. I took 1 out. Nobody wants to stay any extra time on the Monday. So it's a simple one. It was in the it was in the PowerPoint presentation. It's just pick 3 questions off the list of 5 and give us your best answers. So pretty easy. So we should get through that one pretty quick.
Are we gonna have that up
The
on
PowerPoint should come up.
Okay, great.
Will the PowerPoint?
Yeah, as soon as I drop this, I'll go and find that and I'll make sure it's. Just give us.
Thank you all for working with me on my first time was working on a study section. It was fun to work with Bernie and I can't wait for the next one.
And Jenny really drove the creation of our PowerPoint, so thank you for doing that.
Oh, you're welcome.
If I drove, I meet you did it.
Great, thanks so much, guys. All right, I think we're ready to transition to the first item.
So do you want us to just? We can set the stage for this, and I think you all have met at this point, our assistant city attorney, Andy Frohart. We are so lucky in the city of Boulder to have an in-house counsel. Not all cities have that. Some of my colleagues have 30 minutes once a month with an attorney where they have to consolidate their questions, and if it's more, it's very expensive and by the hour. And we have incredible in-house counsel. And I'm really glad that Andy is on the team to help us do great contracting and keep us out of trouble and help us keep other people out of trouble. And so one of the ways the city attorney's office does help, though, is in supporting boards and commissions in their roles. This is a presentation that Andy's updated. We've given it to previous CRABs. Actually, it was about 2 years ago. And I think there's value probably all the time, because what I believe to be true is folks join the CRAB because they care deeply about parks and recreation, but maybe have never been to a CRAB meeting, or if they have one or two in the recruitment, don't know it, want to be helpful. We want to support you. So Andy's going to give an overview of what, the city's constitution or charter says about that, and then is here for any questions that you might have or the discussion. And Elliot's going to support also is the architect of the latest update to the handbook, which is if the charter is the what, then the handbook is the how, and has a lot of process information. It's really helpful.
Yeah, so hi, everybody. I'm Andy Frohart. I've been with the city for about a year and 6 months now. Before that, I came from the Colorado Attorney General's office, where I was there for about 8 years. And before that, I was in private practice. So I, first of all, thank you all for being on a board. I know it's probably not fun to do 3 or 4 hours of volunteerism every month. And I come from this, I come from a perspective of seeing the benefits of public engagement involvement. And so when I was with the state, I represented kind of 2 primary departments, but one of them was CDOT. And I've seen highway projects altered significantly late in the design phase, like multi-million dollars of alterations, because somebody in a public meeting raised their hand and said, hey, have you guys thought about the visibility of this lane as it merges into this lane? And the engineers went back, and I was like amazed to see engineers who had spent all this time, entered into a contract, and they go back and they reevaluate it, and we redesigned it. I shouldn't say they redesigned it, and we created a new contract that I think was a better result. So there's other instances, I could go on and on about other instances in which public involvement has been really, really helpful to help, staff kind of glean additional insights and perspectives and get another look at things that maybe they're not looking at. So I just truly, want you all to know that and appreciate that. So we'll pull up here the CRAB's role. So my computer just went to sleep too. Give me a second. So Ellie thought it would be good to walk through just board roles and functions in a particular CRAB. Go ahead and click Rosa. So the city charter, that's effectively our constitution. So CRAB was created, I think, in 1961. And so it has a long history, and throughout that history, it's been sort of described and in some respects expanded upon within the Boulder Revised Code, which is basically our city laws, so our city statutes. So as a home rule city, we have a lot of discretion in the ways in which we can create things in Boulder that are unique for ourselves. The city has done that in a variety of ways. I don't know that I need to hit upon many of these points other than just to say that, as a board, just as you all are a function of government and representatives of government in this capacity, so are we. And one of our principal prerogatives is just to make sure we're enacting the law as it's written by our legislative bodies. And so that's what I spend a good portion of my time trying to do, is to make sure we have authority and that we're operating within that authority with whatever we're doing. And similar for you all, to the extent you decide to, I guess, call upon me to kind of help advise you and help steer you in that direction. I know you all are pretty independent, and it probably helps having like Elliot chairing to understand some of those, but just know that I'm available for those questions if you ever need them. Go ahead. The functions of the PRAB, so, there's a few pieces, and I'm gonna pull up a charter, the charter, the kind of the principal PRAB section of the charter in a second, but. The PRAB shall make recommendations to city council concerning, there's a few points, and the shall is key, the disposal of park lands. Any appropriation or expenditure from the permanent Parks and Recreation Fund, which I'm sure those of you who have been on for a while are very familiar with and manage that. And then the protection and maintenance parks. A couple of key things. One is the recommendations part. It's only recommendations to council, so council ultimately has the authority to act. But hopefully you'll be making recommendations that are informed from your experiences, from your discussions with staff, and from public comment when you have those recommendations. So and then the shall make recommendations. So in many respects, council's authority to act is conditioned upon you making a recommendation and hearing it first. And then that's that advisory board functions that, you kind of mentioned, just providing diverse perspectives, taking public comment, synthesizing, different perspectives into something that council can readily take up and understand is really important. Yeah.
I had never really realized this. So there's nothing specifically about recreation in terms of the role of PRAB.
About recreation.
It's like parks and recreation.
This is kind of an abbreviation of it. There it is. Yeah.
There is something about.
Yeah, in fact, do you want to pull up the charter if you don't mind? It's probably a good time to do that now.
Also presumably the funding would flow into recreation as well as into parks.
Yeah. And so this is the key section that I just thought made sense for you all to put eyeballs on so you can see.
Is it too small?
I think can you all read it? So the Parks and Recreation Board shall not perform any administrative functions, i.e. staff functions, unless expressly provided in this charter. The board, and then shall, so keep in mind the shalls versus the mays at the beginning of these. Shall make recommendations to city council concerning disposal of park lands.
By the way, Andy, this is also available on page 4 of your handbook.
Oh, perfect.
I literally almost copied and pasted it.
Oh. Yeah.
This is,
Perfect.
if you can't read that, it's important.
Yeah, shall make recommendations to city council on any expenditure from the fund we just mentioned, shall make recommendations on the grant or denial of any license or permit in parklands. Shall review city manager's proposed annual budget as it relates to parks and rec matters. And make its recommendation based upon said budget. And then may, at the request of council or the department, prepare and submit to council, the city manager or the department, recommendations on park and recreation matters as are not provided in A, B, C, or D above. So that's kind of what we think of as the catch-all for anything that department or council wants to consult with you on, they can, and ask for your recommendation on them. And then may request information or recommendation for the department pursuant to the provisions of, and there's a section above. So, but that's kind of if you wanted to see in charter, kind of the 4 functions of PRAB, that's in it. And it sounds like it's in your handbook. Yeah.
I don't know if this is something that we want to talk about right now, but does the new ballot measure affect this charter or any of the?
It's not. So the proposed ballot item is specific to boards that do not have a section like this in the charter. There are 4. So PRAB, Planning Board, OSBT, and TAB have a specific function like this spelled out in the charter.
Okay.
What that proposed ballot initiative proposes to do is provide council more authority of all the other boards around terms and appointments and limits. But PRAB, because of these specific clauses, is exempt from that ballot language.
Isn't there an executive session division?
That's a separate.
Okay, you're talking about a different one.
Yeah, I'm talking about the one.
There's one specific to boards and commissions.
I see, okay.
PRAB, OTB, TAB, and what was the other one?
Planning board.
Right. Well, one of the OG.
Yeah.
You're also one of the few that, while you are an advisory board, you do have some of these shalls, right? You
Yeah.
have by charter function rights of authority that many of the other boards don't have that. They are much more simply advisory in nature and don't have those shalls. So to Annie's point where the shalls are, that's a gotta, like, we can't bring those items to council without you having provided it. Now, to Andy's point, it's a recommendation. They could say, great, here's what we're gonna do. But it has to go through the PrAC first.
Andy, can you comment on or share the difference between an advisory board and the other two types of boards or commissions that exist?
I don't know that I mean, there's like a commission, so. I
There's like
don't know.
quasi judicial versus the advisory,
Right,
and then
gotcha.
there's the oversight.
Yeah, so advisory, one of the things that struck me in looking at your guys' authority and responsibility was advisory is typically just advisory, and then I kind of saw that there were some conditions prerequisite to bring things and kind of a process set in that, so the like quasi judicial boards, so there's some boards. Yeah, sorry, you can
Okay.
keep those up. There's,
Your licensing.
yes, so I was, before this, just kind of happened since I was representing the BOD board, which is the Cannabis Licensing Advisory Board, which is also advisory in the name. But they have they started off as an advisory function, which was just helping to provide insights on laws affecting marijuana / cannabis regulation. And then they've converted to now a quasi judicial function, which involves having hearings and making determinations that end up being basically the binding determinations of the city on permits and licenses. And so those quasi judicial hearings are typically conducted like a court of law, are very similar. There's some relaxed rules, but you know, you admit evidence and you hear arguments of the parties when you make a decision. So, and I just don't have much experience with an oversight board. That's what you're.
Yeah, and then I don't know if there is one in the city, but there are also boards that actually govern the functions of the departments. So like the boards actually are the governing body and the director reports to the board.
The city does not have any of those. I know they exist. I know like in Ohio, there are states where there is a parks board and you report to the mayor or the city manager in the city of Boulder, and I'm not aware of any in the state that have that joint jurisdiction.
And I'll say that sometimes, and I don't think anybody on the board now was here for this, but there are sometimes when the quasi judicial functions of other boards impact our work. And that happened a couple of years ago when the liquor licensing board denied a license application to a vendor at the Boulder Reservoir building. And that was an unreviewable final decision by that board. And so the city council couldn't come in and say, no, we disagree with you. So there are times when these functions overlap.
And so all that's on these slides are the languages exactly from the charter that Andy just showed
Yeah.
you in place in the charter.
Yeah, so you can. And hold on one sec. So at the request of council, may prepare and submit recommendations. Yeah, so we called that out. May request. Yeah, we called that out. That's that catch-all. Okay. And then this is a slide that I added just kind of with some background and other board experience I've had. Performing administrative functions. So, you know, that's the charter expressly allows the city manager to perform those functions who then uses the departments and the directors. And it kind of filters down. The risk associated with getting too involved, I can think of instances where board members became quasi like borderline witnesses of litigation. And I see Elliot nodding his head. I can't go into too much detail on one of them, but I had a board that was made up of industry representatives, and there was allegations of the industry representatives favoring certain groups over others. And so they were having conversations with different people, and they found themselves as a board member, both sitting on a board, making decisions on this board, and also a witness based upon some of the things they had said, and it became really sticky. So it is important. I mean, you all have a public facing function. So I don't want to discourage that, but there is a sense that the safest way to operate, I think, is when you're all together and you're taking public comment and discussing that together. And there's a record created of it. Just because there's, and I don't want to be too, I'm not trying to scare you too much, but in government, and you've probably seen this too, there are times when people, I think, will be very aggressive and they'll approach government agents like in a non-aggressive manner, and they will try to I would be very, very careful. There's some people that are just not fans of government and they will fight hard, and you may not know who they are until after you've had a lot of conversations, discussions with them. So just keep that in mind. So I don't, I'll leave that as it is.
Well, can I ask a question, like on that, like. We don't have a detailed ethics code, but like, is there a line at which like. If somebody does approach us and say like, hey, like, I'd really love you to back my whatever, can we have lunch and talk about it? Like, is there a line which we should be like, no, that's a violation?
I mean, I would try to keep board business discussed with the board, you know, I think, I would be careful about asserting your opinions too much privately with the persons, because you might get information that, later in public comment or discussions through other members, like, there's always a risk that you're just getting one sliver of information from that person. And that might be helpful, and that might be something you want to bring back to the rest of the board and share, or encourage them to come have public comment, but, yeah, I don't know, do you have any thoughts on that, anybody else?
I'm just confused between the fact that like we're advising, we're not judicial.
Right,
So we don't really have power to make decisions. We can make suggestions. So I don't understand how we can get in trouble by giving our opinion.
yeah, I mean, you might have, I guess, more protection there than I'm thinking of. You know, whatever your decision is probably ultimately stamped by somebody else, so there might be protection there.
Can I give an example?
Yeah,
So we are insulated in some ways legally because we are an advisory board and we give recommendations to council who ultimately decide issues. But if somebody in the community believes that council has made an inappropriate determination on something, they could file legal action. And part of the record from that would necessarily include the decision-making that reached all the way to council. So if council considered our comments or our suggestions, or if there was a meeting that was in particular important to them on a certain issue, that would be part of the record. And so we would be exposed in the sense of we might be witnesses. We might have relevant information to provide. We might have to turn over notes or emails or text messages that we exchanged regarding that issue. But that would be the extent of our involvement. And we wouldn't be sued in our individual capacities ever. Unless we did something like unconstitutional in our personal capacity, which would be virtually impossible to do.
well, someone could sue you, it just would have a very, 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 like, you'd have to be, and I'm gonna paraphrase here, but exceeding the bounds of your authority extensively. But that's right. So one of the issues, I think this is the way it could probably principally arrive, like you just said, was if there's a lot of discussions that happen outside of a public sphere, even though under the public meetings, the Sunshine Law, it's 2 or more board members, or excuse me, 3 or more board members constitute a quorum. If you're making decisions and having discussions and formulating opinions outside of that, and that doesn't make it into the record, that can be an issue too. So hopefully that percolates up to council, or I think, anyway, so there's risk associated with that. And that was actually one of the other instances I had with another board was on a different issue was normally the record is what's reviewed by a court. So that record needs to encompass all of the information that came through you for your recommendation and that went to council. And if it doesn't include that information and there's an information gap, we could risk losing. Or if somebody knows that there was information that you all considered, that didn't make its way into the record, that's when you can get into them trying to call witnesses, and not a high likelihood of happening with you all, you know, frankly. But it's mostly, at least the way I've seen it, it's a threat tactic when somebody's really upset with government that's trying to sort of find leverage and push buttons, so.
So just to clarify, when you're saying you mean the board? Like, the board, whenever we meet, like I understand this, the
Sunshine.
sunshine
Yeah.
law, like, we have to, like, it has to be in record whenever two or more of us meet,
Right,
or more than two of us meet.
3 or more,
But
yeah,
like any conversation I have with a fellow citizen that helps me form an opinion that I bring to the board, there doesn't have to be a record of that.
Correct.
I can't be in trouble for having an opinion, as
right,
long as I bring it to the board and the board
right.
votes and brings it to the council.
Right, so I think I'd be really careful if it's something that you know is controversial that is coming to the board and you're having discussions. If people find out you're on this board and they have thoughts about parks and recreation, I don't think there's anything that prevents you from hearing their thoughts on whatever, right? So, but I think if you have decisions are going to be made, you're going to be making a recommendation and you're having you know, conversations with people outside of the board in the public meeting context, that's where there's some risk. So I don't want to overstate that risk, but it's just something to be cognizant of, so.
Andy, can I reframe what you're saying? What I think happens, you all are out in the community, you live here, you have connections with people, and they'll say, hey, I want to tell you what I think about A, B, and C. Hearing that input, bringing it to the board conversation, zero concern. You sharing your personal opinion with that person and sharing how you're gonna, you know, represent the conversation, that's where you've opened the door into some problems for a lot of different reasons that Andy shared. And then I mean, I can think of others that have shown up in board meetings that it's problematic for you to have deliberated before there's a board conversation, even though it's not a binding decision.
And there is, and this is something that I've seen in litigation as well, is board members will make comments, they'll personally feel one way about something and they'll freely make comments. And then that becomes an issue in litigation or gets inserted into the record. Maybe they attend and they start saying, well, you told me this, this, and this, and they'll try to create a record of that. And that's more towards what we call the weight of the evidence, or, you know, if it contradicts what the opinion that we're taking in litigation, then they're pointing to even these 3 board members agreed with this, and blah, blah, blah. You know, it just becomes, it can undermine our ability to defend whatever decision making ultimately occurs, so.
So if we feel passionate about an issue,
I think you should bring it up in the meeting and discuss it and come to a reasoned decision based upon your discussions, yeah.
it feels like the people who like are passionate about this shouldn't be on the board.
Well, so that's just in the application process, there's the reason city council has the questions the way they are and they talk to you the way they do is sure we all have our passion hopefully for something, right? Whether it's yoga or skiing or whatever, we're all moving and loving parks and recreation in some way. Are you going to be able to have a reasonable discussion that considers all opinions and all perspectives to advise this organization that is serving the entire community? If you are a vocal advocate for one group who is only advocating for one opinion, that does impair the perception of your ability to function in that way that serves the whole community. And so that's the consideration, right? And that's, you know, we talk about when people are really advocates for just one thing, the board may not be the place for them because you have to be able to consider the entire community.
And the goal is to have your discussion and to come to an opinion that's supported and justified by what's been discussed, right? So it's okay to have differing opinions. I think what we're talking about is more procedural, like if there's issues that are being created with how you're coming to those opinions and they're not formulated in part of the record, that's an issue. So yeah.
Just to put a finer point on it, like we're sometimes asked to consider things that are controversial. And we all form opinions to bring to this body, but it sounds like the caution is like expressing our opinions outside of the context of this meeting.
Yeah, I would just make sure if you're making a decision in this meeting that you're having that discussion within the meeting coming to a reasoned conclusion, right? Disagreement's okay, but just make sure you're having that discussion here. I think if you're formulating your opinion outside of the meeting and nobody knows why you're doing that, that's not helpful, and that's not gonna give us what we need in the records. That's a big part of it. If that makes sense. I'm not telling you not to have opinions outside of meetings, right? So that's not the intent of that. I just caution to be careful about that.
So this is, you know, the South Boulder Rec Center is a hot topic right now. If someone comes to me, I'm sure something about this too.
Yeah.
Someone comes to me in my neighborhood where I live and says like, I can't believe that this building's getting demolished. Like, are you in support of this? How should I answer that question?
I mean, I think you can answer how you would normally answer. But just be careful that might, if you're giving details, I mean, you're a representative of the city in your capacity as a board member, so I would just be careful with that, so. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, there's some sense that I would hope as a board member that you'd appreciate the risk of people coming after the city of Boulder. And we can't prevent them from bringing a lawsuit, right? But that your statements and your opinions can become very much a part of application, so.
All that is to say, you can still have discussions with people in the public about crap this. You can, you know, I do it.
We
all
hope
do it.
you are,
Yeah,
right? Because you are
exactly.
supposed to be representing the community.
That's part of our function. This isn't meant to chill those discussions. It's just to help us understand like what the potential ramifications of those discussions could be if somebody decides to take action against the city related to a decision that the city makes.
Right.
And the likelihood of us being involved in anything personally, like we're describing here, is very remote. But the reality is, because we are public officials in that way, and we are part of a body that is public, we just have a different role. And, you know, our emails could be subject to open records requests, if they concern city business or official business. You know, we could be text messages, we could be called as witnesses if there's some sort of ultimate decision that's made that is contrary to what someone heard us say in, you know, a conversation. You know, it's not meant to like chill that discussion. It's just to understand that like we are part of the city in certain ways, and we are subject to various laws and standards.
Yeah.
But continue to have those discussions. That's what we're here to do. Right? We're here to do that. So.
Go ahead. The department's role, so there's actually a separate section in the charter that lays a lot of this out. I'm not gonna go through this I know we're already past time, but the administrative functions, so you can take a look at that. It's actually, I know this is in your materials, but yeah, I don't know if we need to go into any of this.
This is also in their handbook, so.
Yeah. And then this is also in your handbook, but the selection of the chair, the meetings once per month. 3 members can call a special meeting with 24 hours notice. 4 members constitutes a quorum. And you have the power to make your rules of to conduct business, so.
And that's what's the rest of the handbook. I think that's where
Yeah,
Elliot takes over.
Do you want me to go through some highlights?
There, yep.
Great. So, I gave everybody a copy of the handbook. This is the original version. This still has Chuck's and Jason, and so this is just a copy. But there's a more recent version that's got our names and stuff on it, but the content is the same. And I wanted to just run through a few sections with you. I'm not gonna run through the entire handbook, but the reason why we redid this handbook, whatever it was, like, you know, a year ago, was because there's a lot of information out there and we wanted to distill it in one place. And this handbook had not been updated since 2008. So we felt that it was time. And this is not meant to be an exhaustive source of information. There are hyperlinks in there that bring you to the city charter, the Crab website, Way Boulder Foundation, the statutes, the BRC, the code. And so, I would highly recommend, at some point reading through this if you can, and then looking at those hyperlinks. But I wanted to highlight just a few parts of this that I think are critical. The first part, Andy already went over, which is the core functions of the Crab. So we don't have to go over that again. I wanted to underscore one thing about our responsibilities, though, is that we do have one thing that we do that council cannot touch. And that is we can approve leases that are less than 3 years. Okay, so if you're saying we don't have any power, I disagree. Okay, and that's on page 5, section 3. So anyway, okay, so one of the things I wanted to go over is this connection between open meetings law and Open Records Act and what those mean. So, and we've talked about this as a group before, but I just want to underscore some of the key things here. So if you look at page 7, the bottom of page 7, there's a section about the Colorado Open Meetings Law, which is the Sunshine Law. The whole purpose behind this law is to ensure that public business is done in the public. And local boards and entities like city council and this board are subject to this law. And there is a rule that says that all meetings of a quorum of 3 or more members of a local public body, whichever is fewer, at which any public business is discussed, or at which any formal action may be taken, are declared to be open to the public at all times. So the key there is, for this body, it's 3 or more members where any public business is discussed, or at which formal action can be taken. And the or is huge, because some people think it's and, it's or. So if you have a meeting, if you're grabbing coffee with 2 other members of this board, and you're discussing crap business, like, hey, I think we should do this related to the budget, or I think we should recommend this related to this item, that's technically a meeting. And you're supposed to notice that meeting 24 hours in advance of the meeting. And because you haven't noticed it 24 hours in advance, it's a violation of the open meetings law. And somebody could raise a stink about it. So just be careful about when you're discussing official crap business with 2 or more members of your peers here. That doesn't mean that you can't grab coffee, like Sunny and I can go out and talk about crap business. And we can talk until the cows come home about whatever we want. That's not an open, that's not a meeting, because that's not what the statute says. And if we can't daisy chain our discussion, like I can't talk with you for 10 minutes about something and then I'm gonna go talk with Andy or Bernie about it. And then it's the exact same thing. The courts look at that as called daisy chaining, where you're just cobbling together legal meetings or non-meetings to basically have a meeting discussion. You can still go out and talk with the public about issues. You can go out with one other member of the PRAB and talk with them about issues, about official PRAB business. But just know that when there's a third person there and you're talking about PRAB business or department business that is within the construct of what we do, you're probably having a meeting, and just avoid that.
And that can happen by email too, right?
That can happen by email. Very good. So if you, one of the reasons why we don't reply all to emails, and I've done it too, everybody's done it, is when you're communicating with everybody else on the PRAB about some item, it's technically a meeting, if everybody's CC'd and on that email. So
We CC'd on a lot of emails, like when Ally responds to the public. That's
we're
okay.
supposed to, yes, so like in most cases, staff are trained to prevent us from making that mistake, so they will send us something from one staff member and they'll like BCC all of us, or like we communicate through staff.
Mhm.
But sometimes if Ally is responding to a member of the public and we reply all to that member of the public, that's debatably a meeting.
Okay.
But
But-
it comes from staff, it's not meeting.
Right, but there are some nuances with that, but I would just say, if you want to communicate something to other members of the board and you want everybody to know about it, go through staff. So like, I would like to say this to staff, have the staff say that to us rather than like emailing all of us at the same time.
Can I add a clarification there? Because we actually consulted Andy on this because someone wanted to share something with the whole board. The very best way to do that in full compliance with the laws is through the monthly PrAB packet. That's published, it's out in the community. And so if we're going to communicate something with you and we email you, it is typically around logistics or background or passing a press release. Almost everything else we put in the packet because that is the easiest way to ensure compliance. And so if you do have something you want shared with the whole board, the very best way to do it to ensure compliance is through the packet. The next best way, yes, there are ways to do it through email, but the safest and most public method is with your monthly packet.
Can I add to, if you find yourself in a situation where you think maybe you violated this rule, it's usually best to come talk to me and we'll probably just disclose it at the next meeting. Presumably it will concern board business, right? If you think maybe I've crossed a line, like come confer and we can evaluate it, but most likely it'll be a disclosure and you can maybe express a little bit more detail about that. That's one of the ways that it's not ideal, but that's one of the strategies we can use to still try to make sure that those conversations are public or known, so.
And by the way, if you want to invite everybody on the PrAB to your child's recital, that's not business, right? Like I can reach out to all of you and say, hey, you guys want to come out and go get ice cream? Like, that's not business. It's when you're talking about business or you're in a setting where you could take action on something, which would be at a meeting. You just can't talk to everybody at once or 3 or more people, if that makes sense.
Does the daisy chaining thing apply to email?
Yes.
You'll notice though, like if you're ever at a public function with members of council, to avoid the perception of, if you notice there's 2 of them standing and the third one walks up, one of them will step away. Like to avoid, almost always, to avoid even the perception of that we're talking about public business. And I'll just note that you all got an invitation from a community member. Please join us. We're having a neighborhood meeting. And we spring into action to try and help and prevent and communicate with them like, sorry, that can't happen. Or if it does, it changes your neighborhood from meeting to a public meeting that everyone, can attend, and coordinated to have Bertie and Sunny as the liaisons to that project attend, because then you're still getting board input and representation without changing their meeting and making it a public meeting open to everybody.
So I responded to that invitation and said I'd be happy to come. And because I didn't see anything else, they responded and said, I'm sorry, we'd love to have you, but there's already 2 people there.
We let them know,
Yeah.
like that unfortunately, like here's what has to happen. Because here's the other challenge. Community members don't know, right? They don't know. I mean, you see in some of your emails, they think you're city council sometimes, right? And they think it's different. And so they may come to you. This is another, I guess, just a caution on what kinds of opinions you might share with folks. They don't know what that means. And so they might think, well, Jenny told me, and now she went back on her word and they're doing this thing. Unfortunately, and we would love to make it better, both with the community and prospective board candidates, the role of the advisory boards is really unclear to a lot of folks.
So that's OML, that's open meetings. That dovetails with the Open Records Act, which is a little different. So Open Records Act governs public records, so like writings that are official, business records, and they could be anything from these PowerPoint presentations that are kept by department to emails that Ally sends us about whatever. And it could be emails that we exchange between each other about PrAB business. And because we are public officials in that way, all of that material could be subject to an open records request if someone submits it. Now, open records request is not a lawsuit. An open records request is just someone filing a request with the city, with the department saying, I want all records related to this particular discussion or this meeting or this issue. And staff will reach out to us and say, hey, if you have anything, in your possession, they'll have 99% of everything that's relevant. But there could have been some exchange between 2 members or 3 members about something. And that could be subject to the Open Records Act. So just be cognizant of the fact that when you're sending emails to another member of the board about an official thing, even though it's not a meeting, it's still creating potentially a public record. And so that's how the sunshine laws work. They work in tandem. two other things I want to run through, which is, there's been some confusion about, and understandably so, about how and whether we can communicate with the public about Crab business. So we, as a board, can delegate to one person. This is one option. We, as a board, can vote to delegate one person on the board to go represent us at council on an issue, or to go represent us at some hearing on an issue, or at a meeting on an issue. Other than that, and you are going to that meeting or hearing or whatever as a representative of the board, okay, as to all of us. However, you can also go in your capacity as a board member, and you can be there representing not the board, but yourself as a member of the board. And that's completely okay. So when Jenny and Bernie Sunny and Bernie went to the South Boulder meeting, or the meeting regarding South Boulder Rec recently, they weren't representing the board. They were representing themselves as members of the board. And that's completely fine. You are encouraged to do that. There's nothing wrong with that. But just know that when you're talking to people at those places, whether it's a hearing, a meeting, or whatever, you can't suggest that you're representing the crowd, because we have not voted in a meeting to delegate you that authority. Does that make sense? Okay. Not that anybody's done that, but there is some confusion about the lines there. Okay, and then. Oh, yeah. Page 16. So the next issue is just how we get information from the department. So our meetings are driven by staff. They bring to us what we need to understand and do related to our chartered authority. And we, from time to time, may request information from the department on a range of topics. And unless it has to do with some specific item that is within our specific statutory authority, the staff has discretion about whether to provide us information on that. They can say, we have considered your requests, and because we are completely underwater this week with whatever, or we have too much on the agenda next week or next month, we are going to decline to do that now. Or we're not going to provide that information. Now, does that ever happen? It's very rare. But just know that we can't just, we can't just direct Ally to provide us whatever information we want. It is really mostly their discretion to give us information on things outside of the specific statutory purview that we have. Fair?
Very fair. I can think of one time in my time in executive leadership where we've said, we're not going to be able to fulfill that request. And it was related to a very contentious and legal issue over which the PRAB had zero authority and relationship. So we said we can give a process and timing update through the consent agenda on this topic. But there's really nothing that is the purview of the PRAB to discuss, and it does not make good sense. It's not advised by our attorneys. And it was a member who wanted the topic, and we agreed with the leadership of the board. Like, this is not an item for PRAB discussion. We will say November's agenda is full of items where, based on project timelines, based on council timelines, we really need your input. Can we consider adding that January, February, March, or, the folks who are working on that need more time? So the timeline is often flexible, but I can't think of a time where we've said.
Right. I personally have not experienced that. And I will also say that the reason why we have, and this is also in the handbook, I forget the page, but the agenda setting committee, which is the leadership of the department and the chair and the vice chair of this body drive the agenda. We meet every single month to determine what the agenda is going to be for the next meeting. And that agenda is driven by two things. What we need to hear from staff based on our statutory authority and what we as members have requested to hear about. So in those meetings, Bernie and I are saying, hey, in this particular meeting we just had on Tuesday, let's say it's the following Thursday, Eric raised a really good point about this topic, or Sunny wanted to hear about this. Or Anna said, hey, let's talk about this one issue. And we will try and find a place on the agenda in the next couple of meetings to fit that. So that is part of the agenda setting process, is we are trying to streamline those types of requests rather than us like ambushing staff in a meeting, being like, I want this information right now. I want it in the next meeting. We hear your requests. We want you to make those requests, but we have an obligation as the agenda setting committee to step back and say, is this really something that we need to talk about now? Is it within our purview and when can we fit it in? If we want to talk about it. Make sense?
Is this being recorded?
Mhm.
Awesome. This should be like required first month that the new Proud members join instead of 6 months in, I think, you know, I think it would be.
You mean
so
how the
helpful.
agenda is set?
This, everything that was
Discussion.
discussed
Yeah.
so far would be
Yeah.
before the first meeting even starts, in my opinion, it would be so helpful to just create a context for all of this.
Yes, I think that is part of, well, we should touch base with what the board and orientation onboarding. I think a lot of this is there. I think part of the challenge is you are so swimming in the deep end the first 6 months that this content doesn't sink in.
I
The
could have
first
read
time.
this 3 times and not gotten out of it what I got out of it today.
Well, I'm really grateful that Elliot and Bernie said like, yes, let's invite Andy to join us. Let's have this conversation because it,
Yeah, I agree with you. Like even having written the handbook, I have to go back and relook at sections multiple times. And I'm like, do I understand this?
Yeah.
And talking it through really does make a difference. And it's the answer to your question, like, why don't we do it sooner, is a function of like just the agenda, when we want to do our study session, when we can fit it in the
Just
agenda.
having this as a resource, I would have done it on my own, wouldn't have needed, you know. it
the
would-
PowerPoint, you mean?
Just the recording of this
Recording
discussion.
this conversation would have been just super helpful for me starting out, because this is just not my world.
Yeah,
We can do that. We can do like a one-on-one onboarding with new board
Or
members.
just say this is available if you need this, if you don't work in government, or if you don't have a legal background, or, you know, have experience on this type of board. It'd be super helpful.
That's a great suggestion, because I think there is such great technology that we could do, like, I mean, yes, the discussion is good, but we could do like a facilitated recorded PowerPoint or something. We can think about how to include and build on looking at what's in the board on.
Yeah.
Who all went to the mandatory board onboarding that the clerk's office does? Because I know that's,
when I first joined.
It's probably a long time to forget things, but yeah, 5-year term.
Do you have a question, Eric?
Yeah, a couple thoughts. So just picking up where we were talking about, if I have a request for department staff, how do I make that request? So do I go through you, or do I go through Ally, or so for example, I have a question, like, I want to know how much it costs to replace a new boiler in South Boulder and what a new sewer line costs. Those are questions that have come to me from the public, and you know, I don't know the answers. So how would I make that request to staff or like
You can, I mean.
I just want to follow the right chain and make it appropriate. I don't want to create work, but like if I had a technical question, you know, and you know, I don't know how much work that it entails. It's like, you know, there might be a lot, like, you know, but what's the appropriate process for that?
let me give an example, right? So I would encourage you to always just email me, because I can tell you, that's an unreasonable request. We haven't done that work. I'm sorry.
Okay.
That's a possible answer. What I would answer you if you were to email me that and say, I'll have more information to share on that the next time you talk about the rec center. So just hold that question,
Okay.
because, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but you can always, and the other thing I would say is sometimes Proud members have held like operational questions, and I hate to give examples because then it feels like I'm picking on one of our services, but I was at dance class last night and the floor was really dirty. That is an operational matter that I wish you would email me about immediately so that we can address it, right? So if it's not a policy related or if it's something related to your experience as a customer of Parks and Recreation, please email us right away. Because just like with any community member, like you don't get a different pedestal for your, feedback of the PRAB meetings, like email us and we'll deal with it. But other questions and how they might fit in the agenda, and if it's, let me flip your question here.
Like operational hours at Scott Carpenter Park has come up to me. People are like, why is it, it was like 85 degrees and people are like, what would it take to keep the pool open another month? And I don't know. I don't know the answer.
I can send you that email. We've answered that.
I'm sure you've answered it. And
Sure.
like,
Send us your questions,
Okay.
like,
Yeah.
and I mean,
I mean, I don't
I'm
know.
trying to think of a non-cheesy way to say this, but Like,
Okay.
we're experienced and we can channel it, and if it's not a doable do or something we can answer, we'll tell you.
But are those questions that we should be answering? Like if somebody asked me what the boiler costs, I would say, I have no idea.
Please talk to, I'm connecting you to Ally.
Maybe connect them to somebody versus trying to get the information and then answer it myself, right? Is that right?
That is a better response for two reasons. One, it eliminates you as a middle person with the community member when you are not the subject matter expert, and it creates a tricky space for you. But one, we want members of the community to know that they can email their team at Parks and Recreation. They don't need, to go through a CRAB member. Like, we are public servants here to help the community. So I think that is even better. Like, your neighbor emails you and says, what is the deal? It's 85, it's September, and Scotty is closed for the season. Oh, with this email, I'm connect you to Ally. She can tell us more. Council members do it all the time because they want to be seen as responsive to the community members, and they don't have the answer.
I like your question because, to be fair, except for the one invitation, I have not responded to a single email I've received yet. Because I'm terrified. I don't want to say something I'm not supposed to. So
You always have a good answer for that.
So just to address that point, like, and I don't know if this is the good answer you're looking for, but you can always respond based on, or on your behalf, on your personal behalf as a member. You can email a person and say, and I've done this. Thank you so much for your concern. I've considered it, I'm gonna raise this with staff, or I'm gonna ask some more questions about this, or like, hey, do you want to grab coffee and go talk about this? Because you've raised some things that are concerning to me, and I live in this neighborhood too, and I want to talk about what your experience has been. That is completely fine. It's just when you respond and say, I'm responding on behalf of the board, not okay, because you're not responding on behalf of the board, you're responding on behalf of yourself. You can also, if someone emails you individually, it says, hey, Jenny, like, well, I'm really angry about this one thing, or I have this question, and you don't know the answer. I have forwarded to Ally and said, hey, can you address this?
Okay.
Or I've responded to that person and CC'd Ally and said, hey, she can answer your question.
I mean, remember, we're the ones, not to be cheeky, but we're the ones getting paid. Like, this is our job. It is our job. Hopefully people are kindly angry about the thing or whatever, and I think almost all emails to PRAB, we will respond to and say, all 7 members of PRAB received this note. I'm sending this on behalf of staff with some more technical information or what you might know, so that you all don't have to be experts in all the things. That's not part of your purview.
Okay.
Yeah, and note, though, when she responds, she says on behalf of the department. So if that person wants a PRAB response or a PRAB member to respond, one of us has got to weigh in. And I would just recommend, to avoid open meeting issues, just to respond individually to that person and not CC any other members of the board. But you absolutely can and should respond.
It's like hurts my professionalism to not respond to emails like that, but I just didn't know what I was
No,
supposed to
and
do.
city council does that too. Like, members of city council will get individual emails and they can choose to respond on their personal behalf as a member, and you can do that too.
We also do, we all have to choose how much time we're gonna spend engaging with, like, you can spend a lot of time having coffee with pickleball players.
Yeah.
If you want, like.
I just think it's really important to respond to them.
I agree.
I think the worst thing is we say we want this public involvement, we value their opinion, and then the email just goes unresponded.
Yeah.
I think that to me, it's just infuriating, and like, so, I just hope we have a protocol that, even if we don't say that much, at least the email was received,
Right.
like. At
And then I
least-
guess my other question there in regard to that is, if there is somebody who is already taking charge, like if it's a South Boulder email, should I leave that to the people who are kind of taking on the South Boulder rec issue? Like, I don't.
I think this is a good, just time for us to decide a
Yeah.
policy like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
feel like if it's not a meeting and you have an opinion and want to respond, then absolutely, the more response I don't know, I would want more responses versus less. And as long as it's not a meeting, I don't think there's an issue with that.
so just to give some historical context on this, we used to have a menu, like a chart that said, if this issue is emailed about to PRAB, this PRAB member is responding. And it became overwhelming for some of the people on that list, and some of the people got no emails. We ditched that because it was more efficient to just have people individually respond when they wanted to on a range of issues and not feel like because we had one person who was running, this was around the Boulder Reservoir issue, and it was like every single day, people were emailing about that. And then we had the lifeguard issue 2 years ago, and so if we start assigning people, in my view, if we start assigning people with the task of like, oh, you're gonna be the responder, that just gets overwhelming and it's frankly not equitable and fair. And I think the better choice would just be to stick with the status quo, which is we all have free reign to respond how we want. Now, if something comes in that's more South Boulder Rec oriented, and I know that Bernie and Sunny have met with them, I might forward it to Bernie and say, hey, I know you've had discussions with these folks, can you take this? That's fine.
Okay.
So wait, so if a meeting, if they send it to this, to the PRAB email, it goes to all of us and we respond, isn't that like sort of? Is that breaking the open meetings law?
Yeah.
No,
have to
if
respond
you
just-
respond just to that person.
Just to that person?
Yeah,
Okay.
if you reply all, then yes.
But then we never know if anybody else
Right,
responds.
that's
This
the
is the
issue.
problem.
Well,
That's why you took them to the.
But lately, the department has taken the lead, through your, is it the community outreach person that's been responding to all these emails recently?
It depends on the
Yeah.
topic.
So is it de facto that the department's gonna respond to these emails? And we can also respond, or?
Yes.
I just wanna make sure somebody's responding, and it seems like there is that's not clear here.
I will tell you from the department's side, 98% of the time, we will respond to an email to CRAB on behalf of staff. Unless the time when we won't is when it is very clearly they're sharing an opinion on a matter you're about to take action on. That's a policy question that is coming before you. They have a packet that is coming, like it's an upcoming public hearing or an action item. We will not respond then because they are simply sharing with you their opinion. 98% of the emails come to you are questions beyond your expertise. They're saying, what does it cost to replace this sewer? Like, you don't know. That's right. Like, and I don't say that mockingly of you, but like, that is beyond your volunteer role
Right.
to know what it costs, you know, and whether, 98% of the time there will be a response from staff.
Yeah.
And if you've noticed that there isn't, feel free to let me know. But I believe, I mean, between all of us, we quality control it. I think most of them are getting some kind of a response with staff with the facts.
Jonathan's been doing a great job. I think we all appreciate it.
Yeah, no, it's been great, I think, yeah, it just.
You raise a really good point, and we've had this discussion in the past where we're concerned that things are slipping through the cracks and the public isn't
Yeah.
getting a response. The issue is, unless we have that assigned person who's going to respond on a certain topic, we just don't know. And it's almost impossible for us in the moment to like check and make sure that the rest of us are responding,
Yeah.
because then that would require like an email to everybody, and that's just the
Yeah.
nature of the
I know.
sunshine laws. So we can create, and I'm kind of out of ideas on this one, like and I'm open to them. We could create some sort of process where we as a board, ensure 100% that some comment or an email is getting responded to. Maybe as chair, it's my job.
Why don't we just take months, like, okay, I'll do it for the next 2 months, I'll respond to all PRAB emails. And then somebody passes it on, so
I
that
think
way.
that's the equity issue, because like this month's gonna be super heavy in South Boulder, and next month will probably be nothing at all.
My point is, they don't have to say a lot, they just need to know that their response was received.
Yeah.
I think that when it's not response, it
We
goes into
will
a
tell you
black
moving
hole and
forward,
then,
I will respond to
Yeah.
every single email. I'll tell you.
Yeah.
That
I
will-
often respond, by the way.
okay.
I often respond.
I just was waiting.
I know, but now I realize that I can't tell if anybody else responds,
Yeah.
so that's
Yeah.
like, it's like this,
We could,
you know.
we could CC Rosa and Rosa could say, Bernie responded to this email or Jenny responded to this email
Yeah,
to the group. That just generates a lot more email though, I don't think.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I worked for federal government, when an email came in like that, it got tracked and monitored and became part of the official record,
Mhm.
right, on that particular topic.
Right.
And so like, public comment came in, it wasn't just like, oh, well, no, it was really, like they tracked in and made, the response was due in a certain number of days, and
Mhm.
it just seems this is a little bit, a little loose. Especially when we give all this lip service to saying, hey, we value your input, but then we don't have the, like,
Yeah.
Well, we
courtesy to
also-
sort of give them even a chain response,
I mean, maybe there's an automatic response we could generate from the PRAB that's like, sorry?
There is one, I believe.
Is
If you
there?
email the CRAB email, don't you get an automatic response that says all 7 members of the board have received? We can double check, but I think there is an automatic response.
Yeah, and then like that assures them that we at least have received it, and, yes, it is
Yeah.
great to know that every email gets responded to, but I'm totally open to new ideas on how to make sure that emails don't slip through the cracks. But in the past, just speaking from experience, it has been extremely difficult on the board to employ some sort of system.
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah.
I have no indication that this is an issue, that emails are not being responded to. And so I just, in the interest of time, I understand your concerns because you're not having visibility on it, but are you all getting feedback from folks that they're not getting responses or anything to indicate that this is an issue?
I think we should keep it like it is for now, and then if somebody has some great idea next week, maybe bring it up and.
Yep.
We can all take a day of the week. Like I respond to emails on Sundays. Eric takes Mondays, et cetera.
I don't want to do that. That's my personal opinion. Sorry, because I like
Clear
this.
and concise
Yeah.
response. I think we should think about it and
Yeah.
then move on, and bring it up in business next
Yeah.
week.
I feel much more comfortable responding now that we've had this
Me too.
conversation.
I will respond to everything.
I respond to most of the emails that come in.
I just was scared to until.
Well, I think I don't feel a need if the departments respond, right? But if like, you know, a couple days go by, nothing happens, there's no response, it's still sitting there. And okay,
Oh,
like,
yeah, you wouldn't know.
I'll, happy to tell you. I'll respond.
Okay. Let's move on to youth engagement.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I know Brian and Scott have done background and they're gonna keep it high level. We sent the information in advance so that you all could review the details. They're gonna give an overview. We hear the board's interest in talking about kids. It aligns with the community's priority on kids because all of our work is framed by our CRAB, planning board, and city council unanimously approved department plan. They're gonna give an overview of what the plan says, the work that's been done and the work to come. So.
And I noticed on your agenda, it has team building in between, so if you all want to do your team building first.
So as of right now, we're 13 minutes late,
Okay.
so.
I mean, if you guys are okay, scrolling right into use, yeah, okay.
I feel more like a team.
Me too. I know what teams are gonna do. I know.
You can control with this.
Are we waiting? Are we waiting on? Are we go?
I think we are good to go.
Taking a
Are
beat.
you ready, Brian?
Yeah, great stuff.
Well, thank you for giving us a little bit of time today to chat. Scott Schuttenberg, Deputy Director, and Brian, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Brian Beery, I'm one of the senior recreation managers at support our community building and partnership.
So as Ali mentioned, we're gonna keep things pretty high level and hopefully share a little bit more about programming and partnerships. And I'll let Brian kind of take it away with the first slide.
Sure. In terms of how we approach this, talking about youth engagement activities, Scott will get to it a little bit later, but this is an area that touches so many different aspects of our work across the department. We really tried to frame the discussion and keep it grounded somewhere in between the thought process that we support the health and well-being of the entire Boulder community, including young people, and zooming in all the way to specific program areas. However, there are some elements in terms of when we ask the community about what are their needs, what are the areas we should be focusing on within this 5-year period that we look to coming out of a department plan. And the last time we did that in the department plan, lots of engagement, statistically valid surveys, focus groups, all manner of outreach. We heard 4 main themes and findings for the way that we serve young people. One is that there's some gaps around teams in volunteer and leadership. Coming out of COVID, mental health was highlighted in an area that was just as important as physical health. Access to nature, despite all of our resources, was flagged as something of a gap due to access, safety, and other factors to connect young people to nature. And despite all those resources, Colorado having one of the fastest growing rates of inactivity and obesity in young people. So those were the things that we heard in to build upon the mission statement. And there are other efforts going on and happening in parallel beyond just Parks and Rec. One of those is a youth action plan that is underway and will be coming in 2025 through the Child Friendly Cities Initiative that we are participating in and will help build upon this work beyond just Parks and Recreation. Rosie, go ahead.
Can I ask a quick question
Sure.
about the last, Colorado has one of the fastest growing rates of inactivity and obesity in the nation. Is that? Do you think that has to do with the fact that like generally we're pretty healthy and they're seeing a slide, like suddenly that's a new thing, or? Like, that's just, that's crazy to me.
We know
Like,
Colorado is one of the fittest states.
Right.
I think part of this is coming after the pandemic and being on lockdown. I think children in particular probably weren't getting as much exercise
Mhm.
as prior to the pandemic, and so you saw that growth in obesity rates.
So it's a very recent trend.
Yes.
Yes, and like even recent data from the Healthy Kids Survey Colorado this year, we know even in Boulder Valley, like kids are not outside as much as they should be. Yeah. Yeah.
So Rosie, if you pop over the next one, again, this is us zooming in a little bit. The two main modes that we engage with youth, passive activity and engagement through play across parkland, natural areas, playgrounds. But what we're going to speak to most today is about our directed modes. And so that's around recreation facilities and programs, what we refer to as permitted activities and special events, and then some of our strategic partnerships. Those also, for those bullets of facilities, programs, events, and partnerships, really go from the level of most resource intensive to least. So our most directed down to probably our least directed or least intervention. Can you move on to the next one? This is going to feel a little bit like you're leaping through the program guide right now that we send out, but a little less colorful here. But just as an overview, recreation facilities are probably where we have the most direct connections, over 60,000 visits per year coming from youth into our recreation facilities, the pools, the Boulder Reservoir, strong participation from financial aid recipients. And then many of these facilities have youth and teen focused spaces and have been areas we've invested in recently, even at the South Boulder Rec Center, the Ninja Studio and Community Lounge, and also dedicated facilities like the Gymnastics Center that's primarily used by youth, and then many of the aquatics features that you've seen that are youth and leisure focused.
What is the age group for youth?
That's a great question that we're trying to define. Typically, that's between that 0 and 12-year-old. For some of the categories that we're going to talk about a little bit later on with nature play, that gets refined a little bit closer to that 0 to 5, 5 to 9, 9 to 12, and 13 to 18. But I think as far as the department plan went, it was 17 and under.
And I think if we're looking at the 61,000 visits, that would be 18 and under.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is how we define that. That's how we track memberships and usage.
Correct. In addition to the support we mentioned about the actual resources, part of this is financial. And so our subsidy that we provide, youth facility entry fees are subsidized and cost less than an adult entry. And a lot of that direction is now in our comprehensive fee policy. Go to the next one. Recreation programs are really broken down into 3 areas. Some of our direct service is around classes and courses that you may be most familiar with happening within facilities, things like gymnastics and swim lessons and registered programs through camps, in addition to drop-in programming. We have some groups that are supported directly. So YSI and Expand directed programs for special populations, our Junior Ranger program that's highly subsidized in those areas, and then contracted programs. And this is one that can be a little bit misleading sometimes, because if you're driving down the road and you were to look out at a facility and one of the sports fields, you may not be able to tell the difference looking at a program that's a rental or a program that's a contracted program. So contracted programs are offered on behalf of the department. We are seeking out a vendor. So all these are examples of those vendors that are offering a specific service and operate on a contract with a revenue share to the department. Some advertise and do registration through the department. others do that on their own. And so these are typically things that are a little bit more specific, a little bit more specialized, where having a dedicated, the one I always like to give the example on is skateboarding, Square State Skate. If we were to have a skateboard team operate within the department, that would reach a relatively small amount of the community, with large amount of resource, and so it's more efficient to work with a third party to contract that service. But these are delivered on behalf of the department. The way we determine that is through a service design and delivery model and a upcoming recreation program plan that's part of our CAPRA accreditation. Can you go to the next one, Rosa? Permitted activities and events, you might think these as facility rentals. In the case of that first grouping, and these are around our dedicated sports facilities like our pools, like the rectangular and diamond fields. Service and provide service for a huge amount of the community. For the pools, we have representation from several clubs, synchronized swimming, soccer, little league, softball, and those operate at those dedicated sports facilities. And then we have other uses that are in the parks. And so those are examples of what we call commercial use permit. And those are not in a specific sports facility. Other activities here are special events, drive-in movie series, the Sweetheart Stands and Arts in the Park are other areas that we focus activities and events for youth. Lots of different policy direction here, including a citywide event policy, and then a project that we're undertaking this next year that Scott will mention a little bit here is a community access framework, because we are seeing a little bit of overlap and needing to have some better clarification between some of these categories here in this permitted activities. The last one, these are our strategic partnerships. Interestingly enough, we have policy direction from the Colorado State revised statutes on having a joint use agreement with the school district. A lot of folks don't know that. We, both as public institutions, are being recommended to collaborate on the shared use of space. And so in this case, that's the pools for Fairview and Boulder High, Scott Carpenter Ball Field, and Flatirons Golf Course. We also have some elements that support the school district outside of joint use after prom is hosted at the East Boulder Community Center. And then we have a few other partners that are related, but also have different areas that they support the department. For example, the Pottery Lab and the Growing Gardens. Those are both properties that are owned by the city and operate in a service agreement, both for the operation of the facility and the programming that's happening within them. And then I guess I didn't mention Play Boulder Foundation. We've heard from them pretty recently, but we collaborate on some programming there. One is the Community Forestry Corps, just a new program this past year. And then one that goes to support financial aid scholarship and program called Play Pass that can help young people access both parks programs and programs in the community. I'm gonna kick over to Scott to talk about
Yeah,
where we're going.
so Brian quickly laid out all the things that we're doing currently, and those are great things, and it's all guided by the needs assessment, the feedback that we received, and our 2022 department plan. What's really exciting is we have this great CRAB adopted 2022 BPR plan, and within that plan, there are 6 key themes that we look at and that we're focused. It really drives the focus of our work. You'll see the couple of images that we have here, and each one of those little sticky notes, I know you can't read them, I certainly can't read them from here, is an initiative that's laid out in the 2022 plan. You'll see different colors of sticky notes, and that represents the different themes that these initiatives were laid out by. And so we have the one on the left, I believe, is programming, and the one on the right is partnerships. And so within the 2022 BPR plan, programs and partnerships is identified throughout the entire plan. You'll see 14 programming initiatives, 16 partnership initiatives. And so what we've done as a staff is we've taken each of these initiatives, we've identified which ones we need to focus on, and we've started to prioritize the work. And the sequencing exercise that we've done is to go through and say, okay, here we are in fall of 2024. What have we done so far related to programming that we identified in 22 as a priority? And what have we done in partnerships? And what are the next steps that need to occur? And we've really looked at, because there are different initiatives identified within the 6 key themes, we've really looked at what makes the most sense to tie together. So I'm going to talk real briefly about some of the things that we're going to focus on. So Rosa, if you can jump to the next slide, please. I think one of the things that's important is in the 2022 plan, we had these 30 items identified as initiatives we wanted to focus on. And I wanted to highlight a few of the things that we've already accomplished to date. And so as part of our CAPRA work with Chapter 6 of CAPRA, Brian has led the creation or basically new development of a program plan, recreation program plan, and updated our service design and delivery model. And those were exercises that were identified. We've accomplished that and feel really good about the direction we're going, and that guides what we offer for programs. You've heard from Jackson quite a bit over the last few months on our comprehensive fee policy that was adopted last year. We've also updated the joint use agreement with the school district. And I wanted to talk real briefly about Nature Everywhere and some of that strategy. And so I know Mark Davison is our planning manager, and this is his baby, but we've done a lot with our Nature Everywhere strategy. And so Mark could probably do a half an hour presentation just on this strategy to talk about all the wonderful things that are happening. But we basically divided this strategy into 3 different groupings. So nature play is the 0 to 5-year-olds. We've started this work with pop-ups at Primos Park and doing some activation there. And we've also had our staff go through training on nature play design and construction and do some nature play workshops, which is going to really benefit our young people that want to utilize our parks. That second area, the naturehoods and outdoor learning for 6 to 12-year-olds, we've also got some progress on this one too. We constructed the Nest, which was BPR's first outdoor classroom over at Crestview. We've delivered first Safe Routes to Parks program in Colorado with Primos Park. And there are several other initiatives that are coming up with that one as well. And then the last piece with youth leadership and green jobs. This one's really cool because we installed temporary structures at Primos to facilitate leadership among youth service initiative participants. And so you all know that as part of the naming of Primos Park, our youth were heavily involved in that. We're also trying to really give them opportunities for leadership as well. And I think it's been very successful to move forward with the Nature Everywhere strategy. Rosa, can you do the next slide, please? As far as programming, what we've identified as key priorities that we're going to focus on next, I think that's the big thing that we want to really look at. So from 2025 and 2026, there are a few items that we think from a programming standpoint will really kick us off and move us in the right direction. The first is to streamline and simplify the service delivery framework and recreation priority index. We do often get questions about our indoor pools and how we prioritize use from different user groups for the pools. We have the recreation priority index, which allows us to do that in a logical manner. And I think we're going to continue to work with a priority index and service delivery framework to assess usage and what's happening from a programmatic standpoint. We're going to continue to assess the total cost of service for programs to inform our budgeting and fee setting, and you'll hear more about fees on Monday coming up. We're going to develop a 5-year plan to continue program improvements, and we're also going to continue to work on the community access framework, our rentals, and how we activate our parks and what community groups are using our parks. So those are our focus for community. There are several other initiatives focused on programming that we're going to get to, and that will probably occur in 26 and 27. Next slide, Rosa. So partnerships. We also know it's important that we continue to grow and move forward with our partnerships across the community so that we're not duplicating services and we're really streamlining what it is we offer to youth in the community. And so one of our first steps in doing that is to create some goals and objectives for our partnerships. And once we have that, we'll develop a database of like-minded organizations. if you're a community member and you really don't know where to find a particular sport or activity, wouldn't it be great if Boulder Parks and Recreation had a database of all the things happening in the community? That would be that one-stop shop that people could go to and say, I want to play soccer, here's who I need to contact. Or whatever it might be. And so that's one of our goals to move forward with that here in 25, 26. And that includes the list of existing service providers and those additional resources. We're then hopeful that we can develop a community interface that will promote some of these partnerships. So it'll be bilingual, it'll be something that can be easily found online and can be navigated by community members very, very simply and efficiently. Lastly, allocate appropriate resources to manage partnerships. We know that a lot of our partners like to utilize our facilities, our fields, and spaces, and that's great. And we're going to continue to look at how we best allocate our spaces. Next slide. So with that, you've heard a lot about our programs, our partnerships, and what's happening next. And we've posed a couple of questions up here to spur the conversation. And Brian and I are happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Start just on the last point, the database of like-minded organizations, will that be for sports primarily?
It will be for all youth programming.
All youth programming, okay. What about, I don't know, it would be the function of Parks and Rec, but one of the things that I had thought about in the past was just if we were to do a teen center, it would be kind of a collaborative place for not only kids to get together, but also for them to find resources that might help them, like mental health resources, or is there something like that that can be created also?
You know, that's a great question. Obviously, we can't commit to a teen center right now, but
Well, but like it places somewhere. I'm pushing this teen center, like I've been talking about it for a long time, but really I think that I want kids to get out of technology, but if a lot of kids are focused on technology, maybe just a place on the Boulder Parks and Rec website where they could go to find resources for educational opportunities or jobs or leadership or, you know, but like a one-stop shop kind of.
There are
situation.
several initiatives that are underway for 25 and 26 around cultivating more opportunities for young people and specifically teens to connect with the system, to connect with nature, leadership opportunities, job opportunities. And so to Scott's point, there is, I mean, it's kind of buried in some of the memos. There is no funding to do anything new. So I need to be super clear about that, and that's why when we are talking about framing this conversation, like what we have the opportunity is shape the way for things that we already do. So for example, for rentals, we can look at what is a rental structure that would incent some of these groups that already are serving kids and serving them well in many cases to align with community goals in the, you know, proximity if we want things programmed more in neighborhoods, in the terms of access. Are we holding people accountable for providing scholarship and reducing barriers to participation? We can do that without costing, you know, without adding a service. And so what you're talking about, I heard a couple of things. A teen center is separate. Yes, that's a major budget item. That
It's
is
like an online teen center.
Got it.
You know what I
You
mean?
would like a resource.
Because I just thought of it as it's a database.
Sure.
You know, like, I'm still struggling, like I struggle to find leadership opportunities for my kids.
I think some of that is going to be an output of the work Scott outlined, that there would be an online and available resource for folks that in theory could be a one-stop shop.
One-stop shop.
And what's amazing is we continue to hear about new things that pop up. So oftentimes families will go to the schools to try and find that information. So I think the more that Brian and I can continue to work with BDSD to streamline and organize that information, I think the more successful we're going to be. But if you're talking just resource library,
Yeah.
not just sports, but across the system,
Exactly.
programs and services for youth,
Yeah,
we certainly can look at that.
okay. Like, well, also, what about the Broncos money? Have we decided anything?
Let me pull up on the Broncos money, but I just appreciate Mark is online, which means sometimes it's hard to
Yeah.
make a voice in a hybrid space. And if you're interested, can share a little bit more about designing spaces for teens.
Okay.
Because that is something the planning team is working on.
Great.
Mr. Davison. Oh, hold on, you're getting promoted. You weren't allowed to talk yet. We're gonna make you allowed to talk. We really did want you here, Mark. We appreciate you chiming in from home.
You're ready.
Oh, he's gone.
Panelist.
Oh, there he is. There he is.
About that. Yeah, should I just talk about the three major CIP projects, Ali, just for a few seconds to explain that side of it?
As it relates to teens, yes, please.
Yeah, no, it's come up obviously quite a bit in the Child Friendly Cities Initiative. Recently, one of the questions that was included in the survey asked how often teens get out into nature at least once a week, and 95% said no, we don't. So there's obviously a huge issue there, and a lot of it's to do with safety, access, and frankly, parents feeling the perception of safety. So the Primos project and the North Boulder Park project and the Civic Area project are set up, and we've partnered with Growing Up Boulder to work directly with teens and start to look at what they think it might look like. And we did some work last year for the Civic Area, and it was interesting. Teens specifically talked about a third place, and it was a place in nature where they felt safe, where they could hang out, where they could sort of do their thing. And we've sort of looked across the country at opportunities for teens, and to be honest, not many park systems have fully figured it out yet. There's not like a design model for teen spaces. Most of them are these kind of interstitial spaces. But our hope is when we work with teens, a lot of the things they talked about was, can we have a place where we can gather, get coffee, be next to nature? And we've talked with Boulder Community Health, who would also like to offer sort of potential wellness programs out in parks, like in the civic area, design a space where someone could meet a counselor, or teens can lead programs themselves. So I think you'll see over the next year for those three projects, a lot more effort going into the designer spaces and then working with Scott and Brian, the activation of them and how that'll support teens. And we recognize there isn't a great answer yet, but we're seeing the need to put a lot more effort into that.
And then Jenny, you also asked about the Broncos money. So to remind folks, or maybe even some of the new board members, I can't remember the last time we talked about it. So as part of the sale of the Denver Broncos, there was a Metro Stadium District that funded the new stadium. Cities that contributed to it received a refund, not a refund, but a disbursement with the sale. The city of Boulder's share was $2.2 million. That money has been held pending the finalization of a youth-led, youth-developed action plan through our UNICEF Child Friendly Cities project. I know that was a whole lot of words. I appreciated that. So basically, we are working with kids to develop a youth action plan. The project has been underway for just over a year now. The intent is for it to be final to inform 26 budget development, but even before then, we're shooting for it by May because we have funding built into the 25 budget that could be released to implement early actions from that youth action plan. So we'll keep you all in the loop for that. We're really excited about that. There's a lot of kids that have been involved. A lot of our community organization partners have been involved in that. And that is going to be an opportunity, Jenny, also for obviously some implementation and pilots.
So Growing Up Boulder is not a division of the city. They're their own nonprofit.
They are a separate nonprofit.
And they are the ones who are pushing the Child Friendly City Initiative, right? But
They are hired by the city to partner with us on developing in that. So we are partnered on that project.
and then the disbursement of the disbursement would be through the city, not through the nonprofit.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Can I ask? I saw Anna have a hand, so Anna and then Sunny.
So thank you for that presentation. That was helpful, like to have the big picture about what's going on for teens and youth. I had a couple questions. One was, I was wondering for the recreation programs and the contracted service, if there's any like reporting transparency around equity and participation, like, yes, there's all these programs, but like, is there information about who is participating in these programs, both from the ones you run and the ones that are contracted?
Yeah, so I mean, that's one of the benefits of operating a contract versus a rental is all that's built into their contract is performance metrics. And that includes, I think, I'd have to get back to you and just exactly what the parameters are, but they're supposed to report on their participation.
Okay, and is that like reflected anywhere, like what percentage of like people who do gymnastics are receive the scholarship or what's right, the
So-
discounted?
Great question. Any of the programs that folks register for directly through us at our front desk or through Active, which is our recreation management software, we do have data that we can run on households, and we can run demographic information. We certainly can run financial information and understand the amount of scholarships and whatnot. If there's a particular program that you wanted us to look at, we could certainly dive into that. We do not go through program by program at this time and dive into that. I think supervisors of individual program areas probably look at that data a little bit more closely, but they're not in our key performance indicators right now.
I think that'd be interesting to look at. My second question was, there are some spaces like that I do notice teens at that weren't mentioned, like I understand that you're not really active in managing, but like the skate park and like the skating area underneath the library or the bike park is places where teens are like already going. So I was wondering if there's any type of like engagement to see like what else would you like or how can you make it better? Because sometimes it seems like it's just like kind of tolerating them there, but it's not really kind of like trying to like encourage more participation or like how to improve it. And then like the pools, I've noticed that it's kind of difficult sometimes for some of the older kids who still, they're like not adults yet, but they're not like little kids and they want to like have like do roughhousing, and it's really hard to have them in similar spaces to like kids that are like barely keeping their head above the water, and it just kind of is a difficult balance to have them together in the same space. So just wondering if there's any plans to like build on these existing areas where teens are congregating actively in Boulder.
Sure, and I think we'll continue to do community engagement. I'm hopeful at some point we have the resources to be able to go to where the youth are currently at and try and activate those spaces as well. But right now, we don't have the resources necessarily to do that, but we do want to continue to gather feedback from teens. And I think we can continue to try and understand the needs and what's happening, and then utilize data that we receive from, even if we're able to put together, when we're able to put together the data resources, perhaps there's an opportunity to collect information and continue to utilize data to really foster those relationships a little bit. Any thoughts on that, Brian?
Sorry, I was just going to mention that we, so for the civic area, our park rangers working with our planning staff we did engage teens in the skate park under the library, for example, and it's a good example of what you're talking about, where we've changed our community engagement rather than being from events where people have to turn up to obviously going to folks, and in this case, especially teens. And another example of that is at Primos, where working with, again, our YSI program, working with planning staff, have engaged teens, and we even to the point where we have the first citywide teen community connector representing the disability community. So we're making inroads, and like Scott's point, we're trying to like think about how do we best use our resources to get this to work, knowing that we don't have you never have as much as you want, but we're looking at ways to be more efficient and definitely think about ways to sort of create more engagement with teens, not just as a one-off, but over a period of time in those projects.
How else are you engaging with the youth?
In what way? Do you mean for feedback on
Feedback.
projects? Mr. Davison?
Well, I think yes, and we certainly do surveys and try and get feedback for each of the programs. So Brian mentioned all the existing programs that are happening, either within facilities or the self-directed or program registrations. And so I think within a lot of our programs, we do, I'd love to see more pre and post surveying and understanding the impact that we're making. And I think we're looking at doing some of that work as part of the service delivery model. You could probably talk about that a little bit, but I think there's always room for more, but we certainly want to try and get feedback to make sure that what we're offering is as relevant as possible and impacting as many people as we can.
Yeah, I was gonna say, the only thing I would add to what Mark said a little bit about the physical infrastructure and the capital planning was to Anna's point of, you're right. And I think that's part of the reason why reaching this demographic has been so tricky, is why there are so many bullets within the department plan for here are some things to try and how to sequence them. And so starting with this rec program plan, and then moving into all these upcoming elements of a 5-year plan, working with the youth plan. Hopefully we'll be able to make some progress on that really long list of, the routine is in the department plan quite a bit.
I mean, I think one really specific example builds on what you talked about, Anna. The downtown area, I mean, my kids are 13 and almost 16, and, you know, Pearl Street, the Civic area, the Creek, they're all areas older kids want to hang out. And Mark and his team have allocated and actually partnered with Central Communications and Engagement to even augment it. There is a significant amount of funding with Growing Up Boulder and specific to teens to inform the Civic Area Project. And so we really think that's an opportunity to extend Boulder High, to make it a backyard for these kids where they don't want to be in registered programs. This is what is true all over the country, right? Teens they want safe, self-directed, self-organized play. And so our challenge is to create spaces and containers for that. So I think we've already done some initial engagement with kids at Boulder High. It was a smaller group, and in 2025, it's going to be pretty significant. Mark, I don't know if I missed anything there, but Anna, you're kind of nailing it that area is a huge opportunity.
Yeah, no, the only thing I would add, Ali, which is super exciting, is we're working with CU in the Sustainable Landscapes department, where the college students are designing pop-ups that will be working directly with the Boulder High students for what those spaces might look like. And we can actually test them out before we get to ribbon cutting. And so we won't just be doing a design and expecting teens to turn up. The teens will work with the CU students to figure out what it looks like. They'll get to actually build the spaces, test the spaces out. So it's this sort of new type of effort to not just ask questions, get some answers and disappear. We're trying to bring them along all the way through the process. It'll be pretty exciting, and actually it'll be fun to bring this info back to you to see how successful we are with this. What is like a new experiment. Not many people have tried this before. So, and it does take quite a bit more effort, but we're definitely committed to it. Like Ali said, with partnering with other departments as well.
I've heard you mention engaging with Boulder High. Are you engaging with Fairview students?
I missed the last part, sorry.
Are you engaging with Fairview High School students as well, or just Boulder High right now?
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Actually, yes, we're still scoping it, to be honest, and it includes Whittier, and we're also looking at even Barker Preschool. So we're definitely looking for how students in that vicinity of the area could engage with Civic.
Right,
How about
which
outside?
just downtown, or are you looking at other areas?
At the moment, it's really downtown related to how folks would engage with the Civic within that vicinity.
Because that's where the projects are funded and where there's money to invest. Right, so you can actually take the kids' feedback and do something with it.
So Growing Up Boulder is designated for downtown only?
No, so Growing Up Boulder, because they work so directly with the city for so many years, they've actually, it's wonderful partner, because they are going at the moment to be continuing to work with us on Primos. They're scoping what we might look like when they work with us on North Boulder Park, and then Ali pointed out the relationship for Civic. So they work with us on the major design projects. The difference from in the past is they would kind of come in at the planning phase and get like a report, and then they would disappear. And this has been the big change. We're saying, actually, can you help us work with the teens and youth through that design process, even construction, and test things out, so that when we get to ribbon cutting, there's no like surprises or what happened to our initial thoughts or input from teens or youth. So we're hoping with this process, we'll get more buy-in and hopefully more success.
My question is specifically about who's being engaged and where the money is. It sounds like, are you designated to be spent? It's North Boulder Park, it's Civic
The funded
area.
capital projects, the major funded capital.
So
You're
to your-
just
to your
engaging
point, I
schools
think as
And
we look
students
at,
in that area.
yeah, so to your point, I think as we engage the community in the Future of Rec Centers project, that's another area that we can specifically target students from Fairview, from Boulder, from throughout the entire community, because that'll be a project that potentially would impact the South Boulder area and community. And so I think that's where that engagement with youth will be specific to capital improvement projects. For now, Mark is just referring to the 3 that are already funded.
Okay. And Can you share with us what's on those little sticky notes? Like what's coming, what are the ideas?
Yeah,
What's coming
so Rosa, if you go up to the previous,
Hold up, I have a proposal on that to not, so you will see our 25 action plan in December that shows the details of, and all it was the sequencing that's on the slides.
Yes,
in? Okay,
the stickies.
It's also
each-
in your prep packet.
okay.
And each sticky is just an initiative from the department plan. So all these numbers, the 2, 3, 5, it's
Okay.
chapter 2, goal
We'll
3,
show people
initiative
that.
5.
Okay, they're not different things. Okay.
And so all we did was we took them together, and since so much depends on the sequencing, they have dependencies on each other, we kind of put them in a cascading order of the, you wouldn't do one of these things down at the bottom until you did the one up top first. And so that kind of represents the order, and then the initiatives we described really just that top row for what's happening in 25 and 26.
Yeah.
and I would encourage you to relook at the 2022 BPR plan, because that's where each and every one of these came from. They're within the 6 key themes.
I just have a question for Mark. I mean, I'm interested in these sort of outside teen spaces, but I am concerned about the civic center area. Like creating a teen space outdoors and making sure it's safe. Honestly, I think we heard safety was a huge issue in the civic center planning project. And, you know, if my son was saying, I'm gonna go hang out under the library, that to me is not a safe place. And right now it isn't. And I think the safety, how do you create these teen places that are teens, not adults, and not a place to peddle drugs and everything else that's going on. So I think that's the biggest challenge there. Like, at least I feel like if he goes to the teen center in the library, I feel like there's somebody overseeing that and it's a little bit safer, but I do have concerns about creating these outdoor teen spaces that are safe, given our current situation right here in Boulder.
No, yeah, it's a really good question. It's probably one of the toughest questions to answer, and we know other cities are in the same position, and everyone's working on it across the country. I would say one thing Ali introduced, which we're definitely applying as a model, is what's called the coexistence model. And this is the idea that we are looking for social behaviors that the community accepts within a certain space, like the civic area. And that will be that. So instead of just doing a design of the spaces, we'll also be looking at, like we've talked about, what's the space activation, but we'll also be looking at the safety and the regulations and the patrol of those areas. So all of that comes together as a model. Instead of it, like I keep saying, instead of just going to ribbon cutting and then trying to fix it through the design, instead we'll have the space activation, the safety and regulations, how we manage the resource, and then ultimately also the design of the resource. No one's got a perfect answer to it yet, but you'll see as we bring this forward, hopefully this is a model that has the best chance of success. And then the final thing I'd say is something that's emerged through the youth already in the initial engagement for Civic is the idea of a field station that is for youth, for teens. And that, to your point, it would create somewhere that's like a safe space within the Civic that is owned by the teens or by youth. It can have obviously adult support, but it's trying to create these islands where people feel safe and you can grow out from there. And that's a model that's been tried in a few other cities that's pretty successful. So we'll definitely be bringing that back to you in 2025, and it'd be great to get your feedback on it, frankly.
I have more financial questions about like these services. So you mentioned that there's some new services that the city provides, others that are too niche for it to make sense to the city to provide. How do you decide what falls into which category?
We have a whole service design and delivery model, and one of those elements is basically running a program through to see what its alignment is with our mission, what its financial viability might be, what the market position and competitive landscape are, and basically where that it's a big flow chart, and then previously called Plinko model because it kind of looked like one of those big pyramids. That you kind of run programs through that to determine, should you pursue collaboration? Should you exit that area? Is it a place you should invest more in? Is it something you might want to subsidize further? And so it gives you those options. And that's one of the things we're most excited about through the CAPRA process, is bringing that back to all of our program staff and running all of our programs through that fresh again. And and we have had some good examples over time of areas that we have leaned into program areas and stepped out of others. Gymnastics is probably one of the greatest success stories of where we focus more on the recreational side of gymnastics and less on the competitive side and had that spun off. We used to.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
I can't
Yeah, and so
think
it
of
fills
feelings about
this community need and you know, it has ripples kind of that take time across the whole landscape in the community. But a lot of it is looking at, you know, the market and trying to understand who else is out there.
Prior to the meeting starting, when we were just eating here, Sunny and Elliot and I were talking about the youth access to sports and saying like that it might, like, I don't know, I personally feel frustrated with a lot of like the pay to play focus here in Boulder, and we were saying that it could help bring more access to more kids if there was more sports offered through, like in elementary schools, like through after school programs, because it's been pretty, I mean, from what I've seen at my kids' schools, it's been pretty limited. The Uni Hill just started with Kick to Bill, an after school soccer program, but like, I feel like they're in your partnership with BVSD, like looking to get more kids active through schools would be a good thing for like parents that work or parents that don't drive or parents that can't afford the private providers.
Absolutely, and I know we're continuing to meet with BBSD. We've got a meeting coming up with them to talk about our joint use agreement here shortly. And we'll continue to discuss different programming, what's offered by the schools and what we can potentially offer. And then I think as we create the database of what is being offered in the community, that will help us to identify some of those gaps and really then start to figure out how do we fill in those gaps.
So it's like a thing like that's happening in a lot of different cities that everything's just going private.
It's really, really popular. I came here just about 2 years ago in the previous community that I worked for. All their youth soccer was transitioning from city-led programming to a private organization running those programs, even the recreation side of the program as well as the competitive. And what we're seeing is a lot of parents are paying a lot of money for kids to play in those private leagues and whatnot. I have worked with them in the past, and I know Brian's working with Albion to figure out scholarshiping, financial assistance for those. We don't want there to be those barriers for kids to be able to play and to learn the sport and those foundational skills and the teamwork and whatnot around youth sports. And so we know it's extremely important, and that's where we're going to continue to work with these different groups within our partnerships to make sure that those barriers are broken down and access is available. Brian mentioned the Play Foundation. There's also the Play Pass, and those Play Passes can be used not just within Boulder Parks and Recreation program, but also community programs as well. So there's financial assistance out there.
You know, understanding it's not a Boulder thing, it's a broader thing. Why are people looking for these private soccer leagues instead of rec soccer? If you know.
I think if you're asking me personally, I think a lot of it's that culture, right? As a parent, you know, my kids were both high school athletes, and you know, I think a lot of parents you want your kids to be able to potentially get a scholarship to college and whatnot, and it's just a competitive environment. At one point, I had to say, time out, we're not playing baseball all year because travel baseball just it was too much. But I think there's a lot of pressures and demands on families for their kids to be participating in competitive and travel programs. They're just really, really popular right now.
Rec programs also are mostly like parental volunteers as coaches, and when you go into the private organizations, you
Sadly, you don't get a paid coach at like the soccer leagues, like you're still paying a lot of money. I don't know about at what level. But so far, my kids have all volunteers, and they started out in all the different leagues. We talked about this, and like
and you're paying for the league, you're
you're
not paying for a
the
coach.
league, and your umpires or refs don't show up half the time, and your parents are coaching and they're volunteers.
That's crazy.
It's totally crazy.
Volleyball is totally different.
Yeah.
Not ours, it's the coaches are,
They're paid.
yeah.
Scott, a question about the contracted programs. Do they provide revenues to Park and Rec for their?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
kind of differentiate between contracted and then rental. You had like rental licensing programs, right? I mean, there's kind of a thin line between some of those, like a swim team is rental licensing, but a soccer club is contracted, is that right, or?
Right.
Well, they're both, those examples are both rentals.
Okay.
Contracted program, one of the benefits is typically exclusivity, and so you would be, as a partner, there's that revenue share, there's.
So Gonzo Tennis, for example. would be
Here's in our rec
contracted.
guide, we take registration,
Okay.
through our RMS system, and then there's a revenue share.
Okay.
With the provider, it also gives them some priority access over the facility space.
And that revenue is going back to fund the scholarships, is that right? Okay.
Another thing, for the teens in terms of like leadership and employment in active sectors, my son just did the Colorado Soccer Association referee certification, so I feel like like, he had a friend tell him about it, like, I feel like that's something that could be really put out there more by the city, like, here's an opportunity to get $50 an hour, if you're a 13-year-old, it's awesome pay, and they, like she was saying, they need reps, there's like constant need to have more reps, so I think that would be good.
Pass through the city.
No, it's through Colorado Soccer Association, but they work like over at Pleasant View
Okay.
or any other referee soccer game.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're not able to pay our camp staff and our staff that work with our programs that kind of money. But I do think we have a lot of job opportunities within our department, specifically during the summer months. And so we definitely push those quite a bit. But as you talk about the resources for youth in the community, employment opportunities are huge. And so we can certainly look at that as well.
Another question is, do you have any examples of like where you had a contracted program and that it's, and then your department has said, hey, they're making so much money at this, I think we can do this at a lower cost? Have you ever taken over a contracted program and provided it yourself in the past, or is there examples of that?
Yeah, quite recently, and I think it's not always based on success, it's usually the other way around. It's when a program might not be meeting standards, or there might be an opportunity for us to come to a market in a way that a potential contractor isn't. And so we've had some programming areas where we have kind of even come back into something that we've contracted before. I think most recently, our dance programming has come back in-house. It used to be provided by a contractor. And so those are areas that, this isn't a static assessment. The intention is that we do this each year for program areas, is to look at them and see where they sit. And then also, I mean, you have to add a little bit of time in there for pilots and seeing how things go, letting programs grow. But yeah, that service delivery model is singular.
In the spaces that you're looking at in the 3 capital funded projects, are there any other cities that you're looking at as examples where there's been good outdoor spaces? And just, if there is, I'm curious what they are, and I can take them home and research them.
Oh, Mark turned his camera back on. I'm gonna say Mark turned away because he doesn't want you to hear about all the trips and parks I visit and then send them pictures and ideas.
I'll let you go first, Ali.
No, go for it. This is all
Oh,
you.
yeah, we actually, what we'll do is when we come back next spring, we'll bring some of the precedent examples. You'll be able to see them. But just one of our favorites, which we were lucky to visit last year as part of the Children in Nature Network, we got invited down because we're one of the cohort cities, and that's in partnership with the National League of Cities. And we got to see Tunnel Tops, which is part of the Presidio development in San Francisco. And if you get a chance to go online, they've got a really great website where they show the programs they deliver, even the way they communicate the message, and then the design of that site. That's at this point, one of the best examples I've seen. And Ali, if you want to share others, I'll let you go.
Nope, we're good. Just know that when you work in Parks and Recreation, every trip is a work trip, and that my family is well used to checking out parks in any city we're in. But I'll tell, I mean, my key takeaway from all the great parks I've seen in the last 2 years is yes, great design, landscape, architecture, blah, blah, blah. It really is about the activation and the use, and what are you doing to make sure it is great after the ribbon cutting. That will take funding. It's where there was a gap with Civic Area Phase 1. We didn't have the governance and structure. We don't have, our recreation centers have a center supervisor who are responsible for coordinating the schedules and making sure that, hey, yoga instructors have got a room that's sitting open and, trying to optimize scheduling of the building. We don't have that in the parks. We have folks who take care of the parks and make sure they're safe and clean, but park activation is not something we're well resourced to do. I expect it to be a budget conversation in 25 and 26.
Mark, I just read today that they're opening a new park in San Francisco, in the Hunters Point Bayview neighborhood, which was kind of like the shipbuilding area. Had been it was a super fun site, and I think they said the price was the most expensive park ever in San Francisco. It's like $200 million. I just thought that would put that in perspective. But that was a really challenging area to live there, so I'm really excited to check that out, and it's right on the water. And so the former Candlestick Stadium was out there. And,
What's it called?
I don't know, actually. I can't remember.
So maybe you can look online and see.
Yeah, no, I'm sure it is. It was in the paper today.
Where is it?
It's in the Bayview.
Southeast.
The example from my home of Brooklyn is Brooklyn Bridge Park, which like when I was growing up was unused shipping terminals, and it's now this like incredibly heavily used park.
Yeah.
There's this article about the architect who apparently still like patrols and keep.
Awesome.
And of course, that was built right above Brooklyn, so. Well,
And just as, and one thing Ali's been encouraged us to do is, frankly, to make it successful, sometimes with limited funding, is what does governance look like and who do we partner with, and can community members work with us to help think about that governance and how we operate the park as like partners within it. So that's another sort of shift we're looking at. Central Park is kind of the famous one for the first big park to do that. So we'll be exploring models like that where the community can participate and help with that activation as well. And then also how can we partner with other folks on assisting with funding, knowing that, to your point, the 200 million, some of these price tags for park development has increased quite a bit in recent years.
So sorry to interrupt this discussion. I have to leave because my wife had surgery today and she's having some complications with that and I need to go. But I want to pass off the torch to our vice chair to continue the meeting, but you're already kind of running the meeting anyway. So thank you so much. I'm sorry to have to ditch out halfway, but I don't have a choice.
Yeah.
So,
That's scary.
she's okay.
yes, I hope so too. I think she'll be fine. I just need to get home. So
Happy birthday.
yeah, thank you.
Oh my gosh, that's right.
Yeah, it was yesterday, but it's okay. Yeah, all right, well, this has been a great meeting. Thank you so much for the engagement and also for staff, just incredible presentations as usual. Really appreciate all your hard work. So,
Thanks, Ali.
of course. Yeah, thanks for the goodie bag.
Any other questions?
Anything else?
Well,
I don't want to wait till December to see, like, you mentioned there's something we're gonna talk about in December as far as like the project.
Our 2025 action plan,
I can access that before? No.
we're working on it now,
Okay.
right? Like it's not banked
Not done.
yet.
Okay.
Yeah, we have, it happens through a lot of staff engagement. We have a staff workshop on November 5th. Like we don't sit and joke about the ivory tower at Iris, right? Like there's a lot of process to happen to finalize it. We can tell you the things that we think are priorities that we as a leadership team have prioritized, but it's not done yet. So we're not trying to be secretive. It's just not done yet.
Okay, I didn't know if it was just like, because there's other things before that I need to get to. Okay.
Yeah. And actually, on that note, I said December, your December agenda right now is open. And so on your meeting agenda for Monday night is a discussion of whether you should have a meeting or not, because we can email you the action plan and present it in January. So maybe before I commit to something in December, we'll just note that that's something for you all to discuss next Monday is whether you have a December meeting.
I think you can ask it the same question. Thanks. No one else has questions, we can probably.
That's all the staff presentations, right?
Oh, yeah.
Very good. Thank you all so much for all that
Team building connect.
amazing information. Yes, time to.
Trust falls, right?
Gosh, no, oh my God. That would be
You go
horrible.
first.
That'll be the follow-up. That'll be the catcher thing. Well, do you want to do a little quick question thing?
It's 10, 15 minutes on it.
Okay.
All tonight. That's good.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. I'll just keep on making as much teams as I need to pay all the people that want to pay money. So it's not like we only have 3 teams. If you don't make it, you're not good enough. It's just like what it is on the pay.
Just play each other, they play other clubs.
They play other clubs. All over the state. Like sometimes outside.
I've also like that either. There's just 2 teams per age group, and if you don't like it, you don't like that. They don't even care them what your money. That's how competitive that is.
Yeah, like
It's crazy. All right. Why don't we start with Sunny on the question?
So I picked.
So you just pick 3
of those.
questions, yeah. And or if anybody else is ready and wants to start.
Let me give you this off.
What? No, I don't want to go first.
Your questions.
I know, I'm just think about it. Okay, I'll go. What did you want to be when you grew up? I wanted to be, well, first I wanted to be a roller skating waitress, and then I wanted to be a TV news broadcaster. And then I went into the Marquette Media Lab and realized how technical everything was. See, I could learn the other side of the camera. Right, so. My ideal vacation at a beach, any beach, anywhere. And the top 3 things of my bucket list, I say would probably be one of my ideal vacations is to go to the Seychelles. So I'm hoping that I can do that in the next 15 years. And I'd like to be a golf club champion at any club at any point in my life. And oh, I don't know what my 3rd bucket list thing is. I'm gonna call it at that. I'm just gonna.
I'll go. Ideal vacation. I've been in travel and worked in travel. I've traveled and worked to travel for most of my adult life, so I'm always planning vacations, but I spent the better part of 15 winters working in Thailand, leading educational travel certification in Thai massage. And so I have been planning since my kids were born to bring them back to Thailand and show them all the places that I spent a lot of time and introduce them to all my friends. So I'm planning next Thanksgiving to Christmas to take my 5th graders out of school and spend 6 weeks traveling and going to all the remote. We travel pretty low to the ground. So there's a organic farm that I spend a lot of time with that I want to take them to, and there's a company that my friend started right after the tsunami hit in 2005 that does homestays all around the Andaman coast. I want to go and spend a good portion of time living with local families and hanging out with the Moken people in the Andaman Sea and that kind of stuff. So I'm planning and saving and scheming and trying to figure out if I rent my house for this much time, if we can do it. So that's very much in my mind, just making that dream happen while the kids are old enough and we're young enough. I feel like there's a real sweet spot coming up next. So that's a big thing. I'd also consider that one of my bucket list things. When growing up, I always wanted to be a like National Geographic or Jacques Cousteau or something like that. Like I wanted to be a marine biologist and researcher. My favorite family traditions. Gosh, I don't know, I have twins who are 9 and my mother, when we went to visit, made up some like conversational questions and put them at everyone's table or at everyone's place when we had dinner one night and my daughter really took to that. And so now she makes up her own questions and puts them in a little jar. And so we pull this, that's become really fun. Like I'm shocked that my kids actually enjoy that and will answer the questions. So it's, I don't know how long it'll last, but right now it's my favorite family traditions.
Good, thank you. So it's gonna,
Go to Ally.
Sure. I thought I would be an attorney through college. My ideal vacation is anywhere in the world that has me going on an adventure, meeting new people who don't speak my language and a beach. So some combination of the three. And one of my favorite family traditions is our annual trip into the woods to get a Christmas tree. So we go.
When I was a kid, I wanted to be a journalist. Then I became a journalist and it's a very challenging way to make a living. So now I do other things. But I think it's still what I want to be when I grow up. So maybe someday I'll be a journalist again. I love to backpack and we don't have a trip planned yet, but I'm hoping that next year my wife and I will go to the Alps and do some backpacking in Europe, which we haven't done together. And then Thanksgiving is my favorite family tradition. It's the only holiday that my family celebrates and forward to it in a few weeks.
yeah.
Let's see, ideal vacation, I think it's challenging. So I think my ideal vacation is one where you like, everyone's happy, you know, and that you're, it's active, you know, it has to be active for me, it's culturally interesting. And that, yeah, like everybody's needs are being met, so that's the secret recipe. Family traditions, we do a lot of rose and thorn, we do mostly dinners at my family still. And we started this tradition of you get the rose and thorn of this kid's day, and it's a good way to get everybody can get some stuff off their chest, and so we still do that. And then bucket list items, I think it's always in flux, but currently I would like to hike the Hout route between Chamonix and Zermatt. And there's a couple multi-day biking events that I would like to do as well. And also sail across the Atlantic.
Great one. Scott?
Sure, I'll jump in there. What did I want to be when I grew up? A professional athlete, of course. But that quickly went away. But always loved sports. That was kind of my thing with sports. I think the most important person in your life right now, it's my 2 kids. You think as they grow up, they're, you know, you'd be able to kind of let that go a little bit more, but you know, at 21 and 19, they still need me as much as they did when they were, you know, 8 and 10. So that's kind of cool. 3 things on my bucket list. So I'm trying to hike all the 14,000 foot peaks in Colorado. Got 33 of them done and a few more to go. So that's one for sure. I definitely want to travel more places. So travel is one. There's a lot of places I would love to go. So I'm very jealous of all of Jackson's travel and all the places he's gone. So I'm going to try and follow in his footsteps. And maybe the third one, at some point, I want to write a book. I think it would be pretty cool to get published. So those are my top 3 things there.
A novel, a memoir?
I don't know yet. I have a lot percolating. And I've got time on that. I think that's a retirement type initiative to keep my mind focused. So we'll see.
Rosa?
So I wasn't paying attention, so pick 3.
Yeah.
What is my ideal vacation? Just to go to the beach, toes in the sand, that kind of thing with my family. What is one of your favorite family traditions? Our cultural baked goods around Christmas time. Who's the most important person in your life right now? Probably my mom. She's not doing so well, so she's at the top of my list, but always my family in general.
Yeah.
Wanted to be when I grew up, I thought I was gonna be a marine biologist, didn't happen. Too much prerequisite science classes. Ideal vacation is where I can be active, eat good food and not have to cook anything. And bucket list, I'd like to go to Senegal.
All right. Thank you. Jackson?
I wanted to be an architect or an airline pilot when I grew up. Don't know how I wound up here. Favorite vacation, anywhere with lots of walking, hiking, food, outdoors. Family tradition, we would always volunteer on Thanksgiving and then do Thanksgiving the day after. And I've never really celebrated Thanksgiving on actual Thanksgiving, so that's stuck with me.
Last but not least, Brian?
Sure, I'll do the first three. So, when I was little, I wanted to be a firefighter when I grew up, but not like a serious firefighter. Where I grew up, everybody was like a volunteer firefighter, which just meant they like hung around the firehouse and drank beer and I don't know, like had parades and stuff. It seemed really cool. My ideal vacation is a beach vacation, and that kind of coincides with our favorite family tradition, which is, I grew up on Long Island in New York, and we go back there every summer, cram into a big house and spend a week together at the beach. And that was part of the deal. Moving out here was having kids that can live in the mountains, but get the beach experience back home.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody, for participating in the pick three questions. That was fun.
Extra great retreat workshop.
I thought it was awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks, you guys.
Yeah, and just again, like, you know, there's a lot of other topics we want to discuss, we'll find ways to incorporate this stuff.
Yeah, maybe we can fold some into this December meeting, we have
Mhm,
an empty agenda,
mhm,
pick up some of those other. I
mhm.
mean, I think this was pretty useful. I feel like a lot of times when the agenda is so full, we don't get the chance to do discussion. I feel like it's public comment and it's a lot of presentation and then our discussion is really limited towards the end. And
Yeah.
that's absolutely true. You know, I don't know if that's the way in the past or if it's just the way it's been this first year, but like, you know, talk about how we could give more recommendations to council. You know?
Just a point of discussion, the part of our checklist for December should be that our regularly scheduled time would fall right in the middle of the holiday.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Yeah, so we can, maybe next week, we can talk about
Yeah.
potential other dates we might want to meet.
Maybe move it up a week or so, yeah.
If that's a good deal.
It's on the agenda for you all to discuss when you'd like.
Would it be like it's the last Monday of the month?
23rd or something, right?
So remember,
last
it was
The
moved to the 18th, I believe.
Oh,
of
okay.
December. Yeah, that's
16th.
16th, yes. And you do have your calendar invite and I've got a location already.
Even I don't go on vacation now.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody. Yeah, we'll see you. One week, yeah.
Do you have a call adjourn or anything?
I don't think you do for a study session. I actually don't think you have to do